Hello, whoever may see this in the future. This is Future Text Lab meeting on the 5th of August. Waiting to see who will join us. Gonna play with a little bit with the camera. It looks very low quality. Let's see. Is that better? Try to like focus on me, will you, Apple phone? That would be useful. Yeah, that's good. It's just Makerwire. Very well done. So that was the Zoom version. Let's try the Apple version. Yeah, the Apple, of course, that's the phone. Does a better job. Hello, Fabien. Was just having fun with the camera setup here. How are you? Fabien, I cannot hear you. Are you there, Bob?
Yes.
Excellent. So we'll continue with our connections and so on discussion today, absolutely. But I also think we should spend a minute or two to see if anyone has anyone to throw into a suggestion for who we should invite for this symposium.
Is there a theme at all, or multiple themes in the symposium?
Yes, the theme of the symposium today is working in VR and using augmented AI text, as in augmenting text with AI. So those are the two strong, excuse me, themes. So we need a few more people to invite.
Have you invited that Andrea Kojikaro?
Yes, she has said yes. She is going to be coming.
Good.
She may even show up in person, which will be nice. And then I got to respond. Thank you, Emily. She's coming. Just thought I'd make Brandel happy. So she's Annie will also try to be here in person, which is quite nice. Hang on, everybody's being loud. 1 second. Guys, quiet, or I will put you in the swimming pool with your clothes. And ice cubes. Hey, tell me if I need some. Yeah, but not in the hallway. Right, sorry, there's a sword fight in the hallway.
As there often needs to be.
So I have also emailed Adam Chyer and Bruce Horn for to see if they want to talk a little bit on the AI side of things. It's really weird. It seems to me that AI is two things at this point. One is, of course, advanced things into the future. But the other thing is specific techniques that are usable today, but they're still not easy to integrate into projects. And I think that the second type is something that we could really look at as one of the things we manage, just resources with, hey, you want to do this with text, take this code, etc. A bit humdrum, but to remove the mystique of something that now shouldn't be mysterious anymore. Anyone else have any suggestions? Bob had one.
For additional people to speak.
Yeah. But also I need to know which one of us, as in which one of you, would like to speak to make sure I don't sign you up without your consent.
Yeah.
I did invent the our friend with the incredibly complicated Chinese sounding name. What's his name? Yuli.
Oh, Iliu.
How do I spell it?
Y-I-L-I-U.
Y-I.
Yeah, it's that top one.
I should
Leo.
just call him Shen Burke, call him by his last name. So obviously I have invited him. I haven't heard back yet. He's doing some kind of a big update, so not sure what's happening. Brandel and Fabien, you both want to present, right?
I'm not sure. I'll have to think about it in the context of how I would talk to my manager about it and things. I mean, I'd very much like to, but in terms of what's acceptable, I'd like to play it safe and make sure that I don't, raise anybody's ire.
Yeah. Okay.
Because what I do is not future of text per se at work, but yeah.
No, I understand. You have a situation. Fabien, you're saying big green yes to presenting, right? Fantastic.
Big green, yes.
Fantastic. Yeah, Bob Stein, I believe, will be there. We have he said yes, but in an email to Bob Stein, Jaron Lanier, not to me. So I can't count on him yet, but I think he should, if he is available, do the keynote at the very beginning, because I think he will be inspirational, but also largely irrelevant for a lot of the other work.
Yes, absolutely. I haven't contacted him, but I also really like what's his name? Yeah, he's in Australia, a French fellow.
Google French fellow in Australia.
He was at Monash.
Are you talking about Ian Neal, Codex? Is that what it said? I'm not sure if he's French, but I think he's in Australia.
Maxime Cordell.
A VR or AI guy?
VR.
Maxine, could you give me the writing in chat, please? I mean,
yeah, I'm finding his this fella.
So here's the thing. In reading further in this book today, the chapter I'm on, Thinking with Pairs, I'm sure it's no news to anybody, but she makes the points to a lot of research that people think better in groups. And people think better when they teach. So I think that's what we do in our little group here. We help each other think. And, that's important, and we need to support that. But also, Bob very much is good at pushing up for specifics. So that's finding the balance there. Anyway, did you give me, here it is, top of the screen.
He's the fellow who's responsible for immersive MXs, and he was first or second author on one of the preprints that Bob linked this week.
Oh, excellent.
Immersive visual data stories, stuff like that. But he's the one who is doing the graphs, managing the graphs that you were able to manipulate the axes by pulling them around in 3D space. So being able to do an XY scatter plot by grabbing these things and putting them together, or having a series by putting them like that.
Would you like to invite him? Are you in contact?
I've not been in contact. He seems to. I've been following him on Twitter. He seems to follow me as well, but I haven't had any other contact beyond that.
Right. Anyone else before we move on? We've got to have some AI people. Come on, guys.
Oh,
I don't know AI very well. Is the thing. It's after undergrad, I was so disenfranchised by it that I kind of went off it as a subject because of the limits of what it seemed to have as relevance for me.
there's another interesting guy at Monash in AI named Tim Dwyer. And he's attempting to, he's been relevant in another project I've been helping on, or well, maybe in the next, you know, if funded and all that sort of thing. I haven't met him, but my colleague has been sending me a paper or two of his. He's creating, he's linking documents through an AI-produced diagrammatic process that finds the key elements in a particular to answer a particular problem or question, and it finds the documents that are connected, time sequences them, links them together in a diagram, and prints them, you know, shows them to you, all with AI. It's pretty interesting. I think it's fairly early. It's really hard to tell from his 30-page paper, does he add the actual sentences that summarize these things that that AI has found, or does AI actually produce the sentences? I mean, it's a terrible, you know, in that sense, a badly written paper. I should be able to find that in the first, either in the conclusion or in the beginning somewhere. But anyway, it's the most advanced thing that I know of in terms of visualizing diagrams with actual story like content. He's using the newspaper-like stories, parts of stories that he links together. So I'd be interested in hearing him.
Yeah, no, that's great. I've added him, absolutely. Hi, Peter.
Hello.
We're yeah, I'll copy and paste because you just after Brandel entered. We're thinking of who else to invite on the AR or VR side for the symposium, and I see you have your hand up, Fabien.
Yes, I know Olivier Grisel, who is an open source contributor to an AI framework called SCLTK, which is like a basis for quite a bit of AI projects. I don't know if he's a speaker much, to be honest, but I can definitely ask. That being said, I think some of the most interesting people for the group would be people working like on NLTK or natural language processing in general. People who work on computer vision there might be some overlap, but overall, like NLP is about written text. So maybe that sounds a bit too narrow at first, but at least that makes us rather confident that it's not going to be too high up there or too conceptual.
I think that's perfect. Please put his name in the chat. And also, again, this, oh, by the way, Peter, she's coming, which is going to be really good. But something recent in this book is how human brains have what seems like specific modules, so to speak, to deal with other humans. You know, how we define that is still something science is working out. But he's sitting here with you guys now on a day where we're supposed to be talking about, this guy is really annoying, Fabien. I'm trying to copy his name from his website, and it's an image. Anyway, so I'll do that afterwards. Right, so the whole human side, why am I bringing it up in context with this? Very much of the work we kind of do seems to be about concepts and linking concepts and documents and all of that stuff. Maybe what we need to do is to consider the symposium and what we do here as kind of first-class objects, meaning that we should really look at how we augment this real human connection we're doing. What sparked my comment on that, Fabien, was we know some things like GPT-3. There are some things we all know about AI, but we don't know who to invite from those things. So in reality, it's a very human-centered network we're talking about. We invite the people we have access to. So instead of that making that a little bit of a, oh, poor us kind of thing, make that the real highlight. So I sent out an email requesting we start thinking about, can we actually show something at this future of text? And that's not necessarily talking about building a VR environment or anything, but maybe we can do something that can contribute to how we connect. And I'm not talking about reinventing LinkedIn or anything like that, but I'm just wondering if you have any suggestions, guys, on the connectivity of people in this context. I see your hand, Fabien. Please go ahead if you like.
Yeah, I forgot why I put it up, but yes, there is in terms of let's say GPT-3 and all this, and I mean it's also possible to invite somebody from the team. I don't like it because it's not open, and they have a name called OpenAI. So honestly, I'm whining about it quite frequently. But there is something called Bloom that's been published during the last few weeks that's about equivalent. That was also a large language model, and that's been done with a big, like 1,000 collaborators team running on a French big on a pub. It's all public. Is my point. It's all open, and I would imagine somebody would be excited to share their work there. So that's would be an interesting option, with the downside that, yeah, it's huge. It's ridiculous, the amount of, I think we often underestimate how much all that energy takes, let's say. So the ecological aspect is a bit, yeah, ignored often. But in terms of finding somebody from something that it seems to be, if we forget the marketing, about on par with GPT-3 or Codex, or somebody from the Bloom team could be interesting to have. I just asked them also from my work to if some of them would be interested to come at the European Parliament in November. So I can ask for both.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. And also outside of these meetings we have, if somebody thinks of something, just email me and we'll decide. Probably, if you are interested, I'm interested. So that would be good. Peter, what's this Jim Nielsen link?
It's a link talking about the mistake Google made in killing off Google Reader and the possibility that all the walled gardens will wind up making search engines irrelevant almost, because the critical content will all be trapped in unsearchable islands within the net. And it ended with a hope that personal websites would make a comeback.
Thank you.
Very nice piece.
So I'm going to ask Bob a pointed question. And that is, for a lot of the real work that we do every day, thinking about this and trying to save the world, what elements are we really looking at? Are we looking at a paper to cite? Are we looking at a piece of data that says this or that? Or are we looking at who knows what? How much is social, how much is cold, and how much is in a document? Do you have any feelings on that?
Yes, one, it's the wrong question, but relevant. But in a larger fuzzy container of questions, it's relevant to what we're doing. I'm going to answer it in the way that you might have expected. It depends, and it depends on the larger context. Who is sponsoring, nudging, asking, problematizing in larger institutional situations, which at the same time groups of creators like this group are starting from another direction, and each of at least many of the people in this group have that kind of a requirement to be writing academic papers, although I think not everybody, or not even maybe most, have that part of their context and part of their motivations. So it really depends on who's doing what, and what you're trying to do. I guess that's the without you want me to give a hour-long lecture on it? No, so I'll stop there.
Yeah, and I was thinking about you personally. Hi, Alan.
Yeah.
Today we're talking about connections and relationship and things, but also we're talking a little bit about the symposium, and very happily she's coming. She may be coming in person. By the way, who of you will come to London?
When?
27th and 28th of September. Fabien, if you don't come, I was going to say, if you don't come, I will disconnect you right now. You're literally 20 minutes away.
There's a small chance that I'll be in Europe around that time.
Yeah, that would be really, really good, because day one, it will be at some fancy venue. We haven't decided. We've got two options that are annoying, but anyway, so that will be with the hybrid monitor and all of that stuff.
Do you have a write-up of a call for attendees to the conference? I haven't seen it. Maybe you've sent it, but maybe I missed it.
Say that again, please. I'm sorry.
Well, usually there's a write-up of the theme of the conference.
Yes, there is. I'll give you the link.
Oh dear, now I gotta rearrange myself because you gotta do that. Oh, chat.
Yeah, futureoftext.org. Yeah, so Alan, where we got to in the conversation is reading this book. Currently, towards the end of the book, there's the whole thing about pair learning and the important, how the human brain may have developed to its big size to deal with other humans. So when someone is asked to deal with a question that is relatively abstract, they will have a low chance of answering it. But if exactly the same question is put into terms of there is a person behind a bar, so it's a person, suddenly the quality of answers shoot up, because we have, let's, for simplicity, call it modules in our brain that deals with cheating and all kinds of good stuff. So that's why I'm thinking now, in our communications connections day, are there things that we want to do to help people connect? I know that's LinkedIn and Facebook and social media and all of that stuff. But when we really are doing knowledge work, how much of it is, and this is just the question I asked Bob when you connected, how much of it is a document, a paper? How much of it is a piece of research, quote, fact, and how much of it is people? Quite a lot of it is people, right? Because now the people we're inviting to the future of text are the people we have access to. If we don't have access to them, they're not going to be part of the future of text.
Well, that's why I can answer the question. Now that you mentioned that, the groups that I usually work with are teams like this, or teams that are even more closely connected in different ways, in that their organizations are jointly facing an articulated problem. They're organizations. So they are there not only as usually experts or quasi-experts, but also directors or assistant directors of organization who are involved. Frequently, the organizations in some way or another are in pain. That is, the expression of pain is, we have a problem. So they recognize that somehow their problems are interconnected. So that's my answer to the team question you asked a few minutes ago, the connection between people. So then the people, sometimes if it's in a locale, like at a county level, let's say in the United States of say 2 or 3 million people, or they already know each other because they've been dealing with each other, and somehow the joint set of problems has risen to the point where they're sort of they're money providers anyway. I was going to say supervisors and partial supervisors, like the county board of supervisors says, we've got to hire somebody to do something about this. Get these people together and figure this out. We can't do this as supervisor. So it depends on how people gather, and you're right. It is a fair amount of personal connection. For example, just as an example, I asked, do you have a write-up of the coming conference? And which I expected a paragraph, but I got you sent me the general future of text site, which doesn't help me, because behind my question was, I wonder what you sent to Jaron Lanier. What description of the conference did you send to him? And the reason I asked that is that probably 10 years ago and longer, I had some contact with him in a small professional organization.
So it's really a pertinent question, because basically when I invite someone to the future of text, it's about text. 2, we've been doing it for a while. 3, look at all these famous people. That's basically what I tell people.
So you're doing a kind of a scattershot approach because you don't know the context that they're in. So it's kind of a better safe than sorry, right? Like if they're going to go to the link and from there evaluate the pedigree of the symposium, you have this. If they're going to go to the link and to understand what is it even, what's its mission?
No, kind of. It's just I feel that who the hell am I? Nobody. So it's me saying, hey, can you come and play with my thing, is a bit useless. So credibility needs to be established immediately. So it is like the one I sent to Annie. That email starts with, in her case, I can genuinely say, I'm a huge fan of your work. Really like this book, I think is relevant. And then I say, we've been doing this for 10 years. We've got 2 books. These are the kind of people are involved. Would you like to join us? By the way, here's a link. I don't expect them to necessarily click on the link. But the reason, Bob, your question and comment was so relevant is the way I sell the symposium is on other people.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I could start this symposium is that the very first one was at the British Library. I had done a small sponsorship of something they were doing, and that's where I met some people, and it was nice. And Vint Cerf was in town, and Ted Nelson at the same time. So the very first Future of Text Symposium had both of them. There were maybe 15 people in total in the whole room, including who was there. But it allowed going forward to be part of that. And that's why so the whole thing with the social thing is you want to be connected, but not overly connected. like, you know, look at our group. We don't even have everybody's email addresses necessarily. So we're passionate for 2 hours twice a week when we can. Sometimes we're not here, fine. But the rest of the time, nothing. That is the rhythm of this group, and there's nothing wrong with that. You know, we send the odd email to inspire thoughts for next discussion and so on. How do we expand that? And by the way, I did a crazy thing yesterday. I used this. Are you ready? I haven't used it very much for the last few months. There isn't actually that much that exists that is useful. But yesterday I did a anniversary of the moon landing.
Wait a minute. This is going off in another direction at the moment, and I'm still, you know, if you're interested, and if you're interested in following my train of thought on Jaron Lanier, then I'd like to go on with that direction.
Yeah.
But you're changing the subject and going off in what appears to me, at least, to be a different direction right now. So do you want to do any further conversation about Jaron Lanier or not?
I don't think we need to talk about him in specifics. If you'd like to, we can do that. But let me just finish my brief.
No, it's up to you if you'd like to. I mean, okay. I don't have to go and
Bob,
offer to contact him or anything like that. But I might.
I am in touch with him via Bob Stein, so that is coming along fine. But as a bigger question on how we contact people, yes, I'd like to discuss that. But the reason I'm mentioning putting on the headset yesterday, when it's been quite a long time, is the fact that, one, there's very little useful work stuff in VR already, and two, I found one of the apps for the anniversary of the moon landing to be really, really impressive. But it was really, really impressive because it represented real places, standing on the moon and all of that stuff. So I just wanted to throw it in to the discussion here for our symposium, that if we want to do something towards the VR space, even defining what we might want to do is a challenge in and of itself.
Well, I want to go back to Jaron Lanier because, you know, I know something, you know, having had rather close contact with him in small group meetings, like about the size of what we are now, or even smaller in his house. My impression is that he's not interested in the people who will be there in terms of big names or that sort of thing, but he is interested in some of the endeavor of he would be interested in the endeavor of doing what kind of intellectual work can be done in virtual reality. And that is the theme that we pursue here in this group every so often. And you know, so that's all I want to follow up on.
Yeah, but
you know, I'll leave it to you, but because I don't particularly want to, you know, get involved in it, but I wanted to say that.
Okay, no, that makes perfect sense, Bob. And this is what Bob Stein has presented to him, what we do in this group, and that is why he has shown interest. But that is also why I went on a tangent, which wasn't that much of a tangent, saying, you know, I guess most of you, I don't use VR all that much for work. And if we're going to invite someone like Jaron Lanier into the group, you know, both Brandel and Fabien have amazing demos to show them and amazing perspectives. I mean, if you want to show Brandel, I know there's issues there, but I think that we've had a little over 6 months in this community where VR has been one of the key topics. And we're still not really sure about what our dream VR environment version 1 would be like. We have ideas for maybe version 2 or 3, but I'm wondering if there's something specific that you guys are itching to do. We can see if we can find the resources somehow. I think it's kind of relevant for the discussion, but I'm very happy to go in different directions as well. You know, in a way, VR is pure magic. And as an artist, you know, you sit down with a blank canvas or a blank page. That's the hardest part of the creative process, right? So VR is, of course, that to the nth degree. So what is the key thing we actually want to want to have? Is it moving a document around? Is it a mural? And I'm very much leaning towards mural, because murals are deceptively simple. So much comes out of it, as what you built, Brandel. Is it the social aspect? Is it the connected aspect? These are questions that I think we could find some real meat on if we discuss.
If that's a question that you're putting to people, one of the things that I think it would be really great is the composition of an artifact that represents somebody's process of consuming or digesting a text. So a book is an object, but reading a book is not an object. The process by which somebody gets the information into their head is not a trackable and understandable thing. And it would be good if it was. We don't create objects as a consequence of that. It's a little bit clearer, maybe easier to think about the way that we listen to a podcast or a lecture, in that we're in a place and there's sort of apparently sort of external stimulus in the form of sound at a time in a place, but it's not something that we sort of take note of beyond the fact that it is this recording. But the process of observing something is as important as the object itself. And I mean, it's basically like, in Photoshop and Illustrator, you have an undo cue, you have the ability to step backward and forward through it, but it doesn't extend to changes to the view. When you zoom in on something, that's not an encoded component of the undo cue, and that's wrong. And taking that idea more conceptually through to a context in which you record things like the scroll level or the scroll depth of a page over time, or the manipulation of a more complex hyperobject like a connected graph, it becomes clear that if there are more nuanced ways in which somebody has to augment and change their view, then it becomes necessary for them to have a record of that. But that's something that I'd like to see, as well as a rendering as in a distinct object of the creation of a text, as distinct from the text itself. Again, applications rush to the finish line in terms of rendering and creating an object, when the process whereby that object was created has every bit of relevance. It's very difficult to delineate what is important about aspects of people's activity as they do that, but it would be my preference to just hold on to the whole kitchen sink in order to make sure that what it was that somebody was really doing when they were doing this task is accessible and inspectable. Yeah, and I think that the more people realize that, the better our ability to make use of immersive space will be.
That's very, very interesting about the process. Now, question to throw out there. What do you guys make these days? And what I mean is, do you produce academic documents, memos, books, what does your work product look like? The reason I ask is a little bit loaded with, I think one of the important work products we have is, as we discussed a lot lately, our record. And what that record means, like Alan has taken some of our conversations and put it in a really interesting knowledge graph. Some of it is this video recording. What do you consider to be one of the most important part of your knowledge product or production that you may want to augment?
I can take a different view on that. Oh, go ahead, Peter.
Well, I've been doing a lot of yak shaving. Currently, I'm working on code in Crystal that will run in parallel on multiple cores to ingest Tinderbox files so that I can do scripting work on the Tinderbox file content. And in order to do that, I want to get to a point where I can be using Tinderbox as a literate programming environment. So the Tinderbox can be generating code that will be run through the tech environment in order to produce typeset documentation that will be kept in phase with the code that I'm working on in my programming project to build prototypes that will be running on the web. So I have like multiple layers that are running on top of each other. And I really want to get better literate programming tools that will actually like have a user interface and some visualizations attached to them to make that work feasible. And that work is part of another layer because I want to build a custom markup notation for the textbook that I want to write to instruct law students on computer science topics. So we have several layers of tooling, and I'm like 3 or 4 levels down at the moment, trying to build the tools that I wish I had to build the tools that I'm trying to build those tools.
Wow.
Okay, that was not a simple answer, but interesting. Back to you, Alan.
Well, this is a slightly different take, but it has been something I've been writing about lately, and it does apply. I've realized that even this even goes back to the Apple Notes meme. Very, very often products are made with an assumption of a stable environment.
Yes.
And very often, stunningly often, our situations are not stable. So I've come up with 2 terms to explain some classes of instability: sinkholes, SYNC, and my fault lines. A sinkhole is a sense of, just say if you save something to read later and it doesn't sync across your devices. But it can also be, a sinkhole is like, oh, I had a tagging schema, I had an ontology in mind, but I can't pull it in my own head. There's a sinkhole that happens internally, right? And then versus a fault line, which is, I know what I'm supposed to do, I just don't want to do it, right? Or I don't agree with the process. This happens a lot with my responsibilities at work, which is a lot of it is, I would say, cargo cultish. We do these things because we're supposed to do these things. And so I have a difficult time maintaining or following that process. That's my fault, or it's the fault of the people upstream from me who created a process that's far away from my heuristics, whatever. But I bring that up because that has, I didn't realize how fundamentally that precarity and hedging my bets has come into play with any kind of knowledge management system or process that I have. The first thing that I put in place is a dual system of, pragmatically, if I save like a link I find or something on Twitter, I'm going to save it in 2 places every time. One is kind of just like the chaos zone, and another is a place where I might actually refine it, curate it a little bit more. But I can't trust that either one on their own is always going to work, right? So there's a duplication of effort that is necessary, and I don't think that those aspects, the instability of having so many ecosystems, ever gets discussed enough. But it creates a sense of tension and prevents adoption or experimentation until you can get stable enough. A lot of the thought leaders in the TFT space come from a situation that seems far more stable than mine. So they can say, here's how to take notes on a book that you read, you know, but my situation, to get to your exact question, is as the resident expert for a wide range of APIs and technologies and policies, I have to be able to pull that information very quickly on the call and give a context and come up with a solution. And I can only do that if I have a deeply, well, I attempt to do that with my note-taking system. But yeah, there it is. Those are my thoughts.
That's really fantastic. And I have my hand up, so I'm allowed to talk, even though I do. So this goes back to our record, I think, because in knowledge management, there are two given dimensions: time and people. Of course, people may change location and names and all kinds of stuff, but it'll essentially be the same person. So if we look at how sometimes we will create a document or a mural or a poster, or we will produce a stable artifact when we have the time, the effort, and the reason and inclination to do so. That may go into a journal or other place. But a lot of the important stuff of our knowledge is casual, like this meeting today, right? And things change, our positions change, and so on. That's why I think that trying to look at connections within our own knowledge, individual knowledge stream, and how we intertwine with different community knowledge streams is worthwhile. And the issue of RSS feeds, which came up in the link discussion higher up, is really important because news groups provided mechanisms for some of this. Blogs kind of did. And now, of course, we're living in environments that don't really talk to each other, as you're saying, Alan. But one of the things we have is plain text and YouTube. I really think that this is probably something that the technology giants are looking at, because it's all about social and so on. But we're also looking at the power of AI to do some kind of pattern finding. And when we're looking at the opportunities for VR for spatial representation of our knowledge, just having a room that the six of us can walk into now to look at our discussions and how it's been shaped over the last year and a half, that's got to be really central to our work, even if we're trying at the end of it to have an academic PDF or whatever it might be, right, guys? Or is that just fluff?
Well, I offered, one of the ways that a room like that might be populated is in part, not completely, and only provisionally, with various information murals that might be emerging. I propose, and since I'm probably the only one who's done something like that here, although all of you've done a lot of the intellectual work that goes into this, I sent around a set of notes that I transferred from my notebook into a now a PDF. It was done in an Illustrator, of how I would begin to be starting to create a mural about part of what we were talking about last time or 2 times ago. I was able only to send it to a few of you because I only have the email addresses of a few of you. For example, I do not, and today, have Peter's or Alan's email addresses, so I couldn't have sent it to them. And I don't know whether Frode takes it upon himself to if I forward something like that to someone to forward it to other people in the group. So I don't know. So those are and what I suggested in creating this it's a set of notes starting to be visual, while I amplify them a little bit visually, but it would give you an idea of how I think we think together, in part by my taking notes and beginning to maybe make an information mural. I don't have to make an information mural out of this. It's a lot of work. I usually get paid a lot for doing that. And so unless people are interested in following that sort of thing. I'm not going to do it, but I might do it if there were interest in the group and support, not support financially. No, I know a couple of you, Peter and Alan, can't even address it, and I don't know what other people have looked at it. So I don't know. I'm sitting here in an unstable situation, Alan. A very unstable situation at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I vote for doing that, but of course, that is on the side of the editorial and edited aspect of knowledge generation, and it is relatively stable. So absolutely fine to do something like that. And I'm also kind of looking at how it relates to sources like, excuse me, what we're doing now, because there are so many kind of nuggets in these conversations, and it's beginning to really bother me that they kind of get lost in the river of YouTube time. So how can they integrate with mural results and other results?
Well, what I do is pick out the nuggets insofar as I'm capable of doing that while discussion is on the fly, and I put it in a somewhat stable situation for people to correct and add and delete and other things if such a meeting of that kind is facilitated. If it's not, it just sits there. It has to be followed on. And in my view, we are trying to create structures of different kinds, realizing that they're not that they won't be be stable for all time or last for all time. But unless we have some structures that we're working on and contributing jointly to, then we just have a series of one conversation after another. It has to have goals and agreement on goals, and you have to ask somebody, the chairman of the meeting, the facilitator of the meeting has to ask, are we in agreement? This is what we're going to do, or are we not in agreement? If we're not, that's fine. I'm happy with whatever is agreed, but if we're just tracking a discussion, well, then we're just tracking a discussion. I may tune in when I want to or not. That's kind of the attitude that I have.
Bob, what would you like the topic of this to be?
Go ahead. Somebody else wants to
I was
talk.
just going to say, I think that based on the material that Bob has produced, that's fairly clear. I think that the discussion that we were having a couple of weeks ago has some pretty interesting momentum behind it. I haven't gone through all of the materials recently just because I've been scrambling to figure out how to do my new job. But I think in terms of how we understand those relationships, right? Pick it up, open it up. That there's a lot of stuff there.
So is that what you'd like to have a curated discussion on, Bob, and to create a mural on different kinds of relationships as you emailed? Is that what you're thinking about?
I have experienced that creating something together with a goal and a purpose will helps at least me and usually I find others who are it helps them stabilize some of their thinking for a while, and also gives them a chance to jointly agree on some changes.
Yeah, no, I think that's worthwhile. But in terms of what this community is and does, we have 11 years of Future of Tech Symposium recordings. We have 2 books, we have many journals, and the journals aren't being read yet, which is absolutely fine because the people who care are the people who are actually in the meetings. So nothing wrong with that. But if we create a poster or mural on a specific knowledge aspect, the question then becomes how that fits into the community and what we're communicating. And this is why I think that to do knowledge work to support our own community so that other people and ourselves have access to what we've been going through would be connected to what you're saying. I'm completely in agreement that we should do sessions that you're talking about. I'm just wondering how it fits into the longer dialogue, because when I did the first Future of Text book, it's absolutely ridiculously massive. I did very, very little editing. I wanted a lot of people to have their views in there, and it becomes much skipping about to read. So the question becomes more and more on how do we support the human community to be part of our dialogue, I think. And I think Alan has points on that. You know, we talked about mailing lists and all kinds of things a while ago. So now, you know, what is the point of our community? Is it to develop a new set of knowledge constructs? Is it to highlight issues? Is it to inspire? I think that comes into it a bit.
Which community?
The Future of Text community.
The several hundred people who contributed or who've been participated in meetings. Is that the community you're talking about?
Primarily, yes, but more of the core community. Quite a lot of people contributed to the books and to the symposium, come give a piece of knowledge and leave, which is absolutely fine. It means we get a really broad range of people. But I'm also thinking that, you know, when
what do you
Apple
want
said,
from them? What do what are you wanting from them now, this minute?
I don't want anything more from them, but what I want to do is, okay, personally, selfishly, from my own perspective of the things that I'm doing, how it comes together, the book and the journal will be quite important because I want more people to be involved in dealing with the questions that we're dealing with. And that means upping the quality of the interaction with that information. You know, we have to do a little bit of marketing and say, hey, come and look at our journal. Hey, come and look at our book. Look at the symposium. But there's got to be more there right now. And I think this is a good thing. Right now, it's very indulgent. It's a bunch of people talking about something they care about. And there's nothing wrong with that. But how can we take that honest indulgence and shape it in such a way that it has wider reach and inspiration? The goal of the community, to me, is twofold. One, for people to have a bit more appreciation that text is fundamentally powerful, but it can also be improved. It's not something invented 4,500 years ago, whatever, and it's stable. It just happens we have copy and paste now. But in order to do that, we need to walk the walk a little bit. So, you know, we're trying to do specific things. And that's why it would be amazing. Let's say on the next symposium, we have at least a session where there are some things in VR for those who want to go into it. Otherwise, they can view it on screens, of course, of a little bit of a new way of looking at it. Because when the Oculus new version comes out and the Apple headset comes out, I know one thing for sure, that some of the social business stuff will be done by them, not necessarily brilliantly, not necessarily solved, but they will have amazing meeting rooms and they will have really cool ways to get stuff later. But to be able to properly record and then do a normal human polish or edit, and then ways to extract that in the future so someone can walk in the door and, I mean, look at Brandel and his new job. What was the documentation for his job? It was years worth of Slack, right? And maybe that can be our case study. How do you help any community onboard, I hate that term, but there you go, onboard a new person by giving them a really powerfully flexible access to the knowledge the community has generated?
So
On
you
the-
don't know what you want yet here.
I know what the question is, but I don't know what the answer is now, because then, we could just build it.
I agree. I think perhaps even where what Bob's picking up on is and what you mentioned, Freud, about sort of self-indulgent. I don't know that there's a problem formulation yet. So even steps before a hypothesis or anything like that, just saying, here's how we're going to here are the parts that we find that are irrelevant to our focus, and here's the level at which, or here's how we're going to frame the question so as to get rid of all these distracting bits, and then either that frame's correct or not, but if it seems like the interest, the broad interest in this topic comes from a feeling that there is a problem that has yet to be expressed, but that we all sense. And it crosses a ton of domains, VR being one part of it. The question would be, what problem does VR solve? Which I know we've addressed and talked about, but in the others, I missed the part where you were talking about connections and what was mentioned in the extended mind. But if it's about storytelling and context, that is a totally different angle for text, but it's a very critical one if we're talking about comprehension.
Yeah.
So the thing is, for the social aspect of what we're doing, our meetings, it is really, really important, because we are helping each other thought, at least each other's thought process. At least you guys are helping me, that's for sure. There are many things that come up here that I may not immediately respond to, but then it's like, oh, hang on. This is really, really important. What we get when we produce a knowledge product explicitly, it's very polished, but it's of course missing stuff. So the problem statement is, are we having these meetings just because it's nice to talk about something we care about? Or are we also trying to provide the means through which nuggets, as we see it at the time, can be put in a form that is more easily accessible for someone coming into the community? Like the example of Brandel going through years of Slack, or someone having to watch all our YouTube videos. A lot of it is really boring nonsense. Maybe 95%. In the very, very basic thing of, like we talked about an app so many times, of press a button when you think it's an interesting bit and it marks it, it does all that stuff. Then, if we were to do something like that, when you're in a VR environment, what is the benefit of VR? Is it quite simply that you can have more knowledge representations to look at? Most definitely, that's one aspect. And by the way, on the 27th of September, the evening after the Future of Text, I'm hosting Vint Cerf and his wife Sigrid for dinner at home. So unfortunately, it won't be a community dinner, but they wanted somewhere really quiet. And that is when I'm going to ambush him and put the headset on his head. So, we better have a few things ready for him to see and just get a feeling. It's not going to be more than half an hour. I mean, it's after a busy day. He's getting old and, he wants to eat his dinner. But what do we want to show in there? Can we give some impression of, wow, here is a community and you have access to these different aspects of it?
I will translate that, and you can correct me, into, I want this group to help me put together a demo for Vint.
That will be one aspect, yes. In the same way that we look at Brandel's painful new job experience in terms of documentation, we could also say that, yes, Vint Cerf, who doesn't care about VR or a lot of knowledge stuff, but clearly cares about the bigger issues, he could be a great case study for putting on the headset and having an experience.
What do other people want to do?
That's the question.
Right, I'm asking it, I'm asking it very
Yeah.
directly. I hope to get some, maybe not everybody answers, but I hope somebody will answer.
Yeah.
Man.
So my what I want out of this group generally is an opportunity to refine my thinking about what text and text and productivity and in novel computing, sort of spatial computing environments, and the environments that we can expect to experience in the next 50 years should be premised on. And I introduced VR to this group as a stepping stone to what I think is the more sort of persistent computing surface environment, whatever you want to call it, that we will likely. Fabien's got a big box. We all have that box, Fabien. Just
I didn't get the joke. I didn't get the joke, Brandel. Could you?
Oh, sorry. So
I'm
Fabien
sorry.
has a
I know it's
large box.
It's terrible to have to explain a joke or something, but but I didn't
No,
get it.
I'm happy to explain it. Fabien has a very large box full of virtual reality related hardware and headsets.
Oh.
And anybody who's been playing with the stuff has a graveyard of all of those different devices and pieces of computing hardware that have been important to explore and experiment with, but ultimately they're not where they should be to make things work. So I have a number of Microsoft Kinects, this time of flight sensor that people use for body tracking. I have Tobii eye trackers and several head-mounted displays. The first of which I probably purchased in 2011. Just it's a, like I said, it's a technology graveyard of a very particular kind because of all of our experiments.
I get it. Okay, thank you.
So no, not at all. I think it's worthwhile to be able to call out. And my apologies for using it as a shorthand, but he was just lifting it up. I don't know what his intention is for it, but he'll get to it. But yeah, so my intention is to think. It's also to seek inspiration or low-hanging fruit of things that I can build and demonstrate for the benefit of pulling other people to an awareness that this is an acute need for people to be considering. And in particular, people who have a stronger background in more of the informational or discursive aspects of text, because while I don't think it's unreasonable to call myself an expert in VR at this point, I certainly don't have the background in beyond marketing and advertising. But the process of argumentation mapping, information mapping, all of these things are very, very important, distinct fields of investigation and interest. And I just want to make sure that the people like you both and people like Peter and Frode are aware that virtual reality, to the extent that it exists, is not just a fad. It's something that has the ability to be fundamentally transformative to our way of computing, and to make sure that thinking is in line with where that technology is, so that one, it's not behind, and two, it has the opportunity to continue to progress the state of the art, because a number of the people involved in the development of that technology are pretty intellectually bankrupt with regard to what they actually think it's for. If you talk to people at Meta, many times the ideas that they have for what the platform is are just orders of magnitude worse than what we can come up with within 5 minutes of discussion here. So
totally agree with that. I would piggyback on that, Brandel, and say that one of the things that I look for, of course, is just a conversation. But I think the norm has been in the tech industry and all the various amazing fun things is a silo of and a confusion of form and content, where for instance with video games and VR, VR is the form and the content of video games is what fills up the bucket. That kind of thinking, when in fact the form can do many other things. And so that sort of questioning of what are the what's the material of the forms that we're looking at? Is there a difference between between PDF and Twitter, or are they variations of the same thing, right? That's the sort of thing that I would like to get a better understanding of, because I think if we can make any kind of progress in that sort of formulation of these tools, then we can break out of the trenchant rituals of how we make products today, knowledge products. We don't have the ammunition to convince people of a different way of thinking, and there seems to only be a few people out there who want it, or you know, a lot of people want it, but it hasn't surfaced into words yet. And so I'd like to see ways for that to surface into words and murals and material. Yeah.
Yeah, Peter?
Yeah, I'm also curious about the use of VR for software visualizations, particularly visualizations of programs while they're executing, as opposed to just representations of static source code. Also, I'm thinking about the need for VR experiences to be calm as opposed to having that coming at you feel that a lot of demos tend to have, where they're trying to exploit the 3 dimensions. And it's really like the old 3D movies that first came out, where they'd have stuff flying at your face and all, and would wind up causing a chaotic, nauseating experience as opposed to a calm experience. So can we use 3 dimensions, but use them in a way that doesn't put us in a state of mental disarray?
Yeah, that makes sense. Fabien?
Yeah, so I'm here with my big box of old stuff, and you don't want to know what I was searching for, but because I want to be provoked. That includes showcasing some of the demo, including some of the stuff that I've done like literally minutes before the meeting, without really having to explain too much. Like, you know what text is, you know what VR is, you know what metadata is, you know knowledge work, all this. So this is, to me, that's the intersection of all this. Let's say that's interesting. How to interface with it, how to play with it. Most of the time, I don't know how, I don't know what I'm doing, but then I know that you guys will know and criticize it. So to me, that's the most valuable aspect. And then yes, the more general aspect is what is text. I still think that's a pretty deep and interesting question. That's why if I'm thinking of presenting something, to be honest, I'm thinking, let's say, computational notebooks are, to me, the most powerful way to learn about the topic. So I think it's more interesting than VR. It might be also with VR, but like if I were to present and focus on what would have an impact on people, not what I find technically interesting and revolving around text, it would probably be computational notebooks instead. So yeah, that's a bit both the why I'm here, what I'm interested in there, what I find is valuable for me and eventually for others.
Would you send me something about computational notebooks via email?
Yeah, with pleasure.
Thank you, because I don't know much about that.
Could you CC me on that too?
Well, I mean, if at some point, I suggest we do a meeting where we go through a computational notebook together, because again, that's the whole point. Is it's not reading it or describing it is playing with the content itself. So I'll send email eventually, but I think it's better if we do like an active session altogether.
Yep.
I think that's really, really interesting. So a couple of things. Number one, can we do it on Monday or Friday? Let's not push it off too far. Where you host it, Fabien?
Yeah, let's say Monday.
Monday, cool. Second thing is the thing that I keep banging on about, which is this community has to be fun and nice. No one's paid to be here. We don't have any obligation to make anything, but we still, interesting things still come up. So this thing on Monday that Fabien is going to walk us through computational notebooks. Does anyone have thoughts on that kind of a meeting? What should the record be? Right, we're going to have a video. I can do an automatic text transcription. It takes a while to go through and label, fine. But what would the dream be? Let's say in a few weeks, someone comes into this conversation and they mention computational notebooks, and one of us say, oh, yeah, Fabien took us through that. Have a look at.
So
what should we tell them to have a look at?
To me, it's let's say a 1 minute video. It's like a summary, so that they can ideally a one-liner and then a 1 minute video, a summary, and then some timeline. Let's say 5 minutes in, we talked about the general concept. 12 minutes in, we talked about, and when they click, they go there. So one-liner description. So let's say the title of a 1 minute video, and that the video has timestamps that people can jump through. To me, that's what makes the content accessible.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that comes under the editorial presentation of it. But let's say that Bob has a really interesting insight or a question, an hour and a half into that session. How do we make that, to use that horrible term, how do we surface that for someone coming in? How do we do that kind of an edit? Is it purely the transcript with highlighted bolds, or is it a video thing, or what do we do? This is a great case.
I'm going to say something, and then I have to go. But I think what I would like, and this is close to Bob's specialty, and I think it is also the kind of thing that would have lasting value, isn't so much about capturing all our various thoughts and questions, but perfect example is the term computational notebooks, right? I'm sure there's at least 5 other phrases that mean roughly the same thing. I call, Jupyter notebooks is what was my handy one. But there's also explorable explainables, and then there's that's related to explainer videos, right? So there's a question of what is and isn't a computational notebook, what are the features of it, what are its values, and then based on that, decomposing a little, what are things that are similar that may have different names. And to me, that's valuable even in a map format of a way to say, like, hey, the thing that we're talking about, the value that we're talking about, doesn't have to be called computational notebooks. It's also seen in this sort of inactive way in this medium and that medium, etc. That's the kind of thing that, as if we had a format or a something reliable as an artifact from these meetings, it would be a kind of a gradual growth of synthesizing all these various technologies and approaches into something that someone can navigate.
Yeah, nice.
Just
synthesizing is a good subject, but it involves curating and editing and stabilizing.
Yes.
And if that's something that is not wanted or is downplayed in this group, then we're not going to have it. If we'd like to have it, then it has to do with selection, creation of structures. They may not be perfect structures, but some sort of stable structures, which can then be critiqued, and hopefully, in my view, visualized to some degree, and so forth.
What I suggest to do then is on Monday at the, let's say 1 hour, let's say at the end of the workshop, I will, or someone else will try to do a 1 minute summary live. And that will be one way to synthesize. It will definitely not be perfect, but it's already a hook, let's say, for somebody who hasn't been to the event. Just the thing I wanted to show, that's why I shared my screen, is, so that's the video of a talk, let's say, I gave on the topic. And then I'm sure some people are familiar with this on YouTube, but you click on a link, it puts you there, like at the moment in the video. And I think, for example, Frode, you were asking if at some point Bob will make an interesting question, how do you surface it? So we can have two things. We can have the timetable or the table of content, let's say, for the video itself. That is easily accessible. But also events, let's say, tricky question like Q&A, interesting points. So that's one way to surface it. You have that, and you just need the timestamp and a line of text, or can be a timestamp and let's say the transcript.
What we do have in our transcripts is timestamps for when the Q&A starts and lots of things like that already. But I'm wondering, I'm just going to share my screen here. So here is our website. It would probably be nice if we work together a little bit on having these different resources available here, because we have for instance, here under community, there is our chat log. Every single chat is logged here. We have general resources that people have posted. And then we have the archive on YouTube, which starts
reading and
stop it. Which unfortunately starts with the first video, which is ridiculous. You know, here they are. You know, here's the most recent one. But it would probably be good if we had a exactly what you're talking about, Fabien. We have a place here, because we did start putting up transcripts and stuff, but no one read them.
That's
so
right.
I think we should exactly do what's being discussed now. Spend a little bit of time doing the kind of curation that Bob is talking about, having the kind of links that Fabien is talking about. So when someone comes into the community, we even have like a glossary of terms page for some of these things that Alan mentioned. You know, it's the same thing, but this is how, and here's a link. But we got to start putting some of it together. I see your hand, Peter, sorry.
Yeah, with respect to the computational notebooks, I'd like to see us take a stab at building a bare minimum skeletal notebook. So let's set aside all the substance of what any given language in the notebook does. What at its absolute core would be the minimal functionality, and how could you put a framework that people could add plugins on top of that to bring in other instances of it. So it might simply consist of having a framework that would go and maybe write a source code file off onto the disk, then run some command line shell tool to process it, pull in the result of that file, and then redisplay it within the notebook context, and then focus on how we'd want to be linking elements within the notebook and how we'd want to be applying metadata on top, because I think that's where we can be adding value, as opposed to, you know, running a sample fragment in the notebook.
Yeah, but then we kind of have to decide, are we going to make a notebook format? Are we going to use one that exists, and how are we going to get adoption of that? There's a lot of issues that come up under that. And then also, can some of it be done in HTML or visual meta or whatever? So well worth thinking about, but complicated.
Yeah, definitely the visual meta component would be really important. We would want to see visual meta get adopted by computational notebook communities.
Well, it would help surface some of the content. I think that would be really interesting. Fabien?
Yeah, it's too big because Bob is not familiar with it. So I just want to take a minute to share my screen and show, because we keep on repeating computational notebook, but one of us is not familiar with. So there is no need for, let's say, suspense. I'll just take 2 minutes. So that looks like a normal article about a topic. Doesn't really matter, can be about anything. But so we can just read it. some parts are interactive. I'm not sure where. You can play with it. So it's a little bit more interesting than a typical article. But so I think that's the interaction. Yeah, voilà. So I can play with it. So that's already quite interesting. But what makes it special is that I can click on it and see the code. And it's computational in the sense that I'll make a mistake just to show. Voilà. And you see the code has been executed again. So it's computational because it intertwines code, of course, but it's not code that you just look at. You can run it right away so that if you have an idea or if you don't understand, you mess it up and it's broken. So you know that, okay, that's a step. You can slice it however you want. And it's a notebook in the sense that it's not just code. Like you don't have straight up this. You have an explanation, which is, hey, what is the DOM? Why is it interesting to merge it, let's say, in some way or split it? So that's the intertwine of both code and text. And it's computational in the sense that I don't have to ask anybody's permission. And to give a practical example, the other day I was looking at the list of the densest city on Earth. The first one in Belgium is a couple of kilometers away. And I was curious about the Belgium order, but you can't sort by city. So I used someone else, computational notebook. It explained how to take data out of Wikipedia. I loaded that table specifically, and then I put instead Belgium, and I could put Nepal or whatever other country, and then I can run it again and see the result. So in Nepal, there is only one. But anyway, the point is intertwining text with code to learn about a topic and being able to modify the code on the spot. So that's the 2 minutes, I hope, introduction to our computational notebooks.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That would be something that in the groups that I work with would be regarded as work that, you know, or a usefulness to teams, to staff members of the directors who I'm working with. They would probably not be in the room for most of the synthesis discussions. And I'm not dismissing it. I'm saying I'm thinking that's quite an amazing thing to be able to for people who can change the code to be able to change the code. However, it's not something that I'm going to do ever.
So,
Well, actually, Bob, Fabien showed it from one perspective. Another perspective, and this is very Brett Victor, like in the plain text, you should be able to have, let's say, the mortgage rate is so-and-so. I have some number, then a dollar value, whatever. Should be able to select any of those numbers and change them without having to touch any code. And that will update the equation, which can then either be just a number that changes, or it can be a graphic that changes.
Oh, that would be helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, the potential is absolutely insanely vast, and it's held back by all kinds of nonsense at the moment.
But it would happen in increasingly different contexts. That is, who are the people in the room representing what institutions to solve what problems?
So just I see. Sorry, Brandel, I see you're sharing the screen, but I just want to clarify that code is in a generic sense. Like it doesn't have to be very low level. So it can be as simple as changing a country, or as Freud said, it can be with widgets instead. But the point is, if during the event itself, somebody asks a question that you can answer computationally, like with an equation or something, you on the spot can do it, or even the participant if they have the knowledge of. And code doesn't have to be low level. It can be even like a code dedicated to like a, how do you say, vocabulary of keyword dedicated to the workshop or whatever the context. Here I took the one I had open. but it doesn't have to be, let's say, JavaScript or anything too. I don't want to say technical, but
Yeah.
at a higher level, basically.
Good. So that somebody sent me a very good dashboard of some major aspects of sustainability and climate change the other day, and I bookmarked it on my browser. But it looks like something like a dashboard of that sort would be it was always something that would be, I've found to be useful. And I can see that having this kind of ability to change it on the spot easily would be very helpful to many people. Yes.
So
Yeah.
let me ask you guys. No, sorry, Brandel.
I was going to show this if you want to talk. So you can see my screen here.
Yeah.
Yep.
So this is a notebook essentially in that same sort of form, Bob. And this is made by Brett Victor. It's explorable. It's mostly essay, but a number of these things are actually interactive. So here you can click on the source. That's a sort of a standard hypertext thing. But here is showing, this was the mid-teens, so 2015 or so. What would be the appropriate drawdown of our carbon budget at various rates, and when we've sort of gone over the tipping point. So you can sort of move this around to see just how drastic that drawdown is. And you're modifying this by virtue of clicking and dragging rather than having to change the code. I haven't. The one that I wanted to show, which was like the interest rate thing, that so upon my scrolling, there is a buyback program in here. So here it says, say we allocate $3 billion for the following program: car owners trade in an old car that gets less than 17 mpg. If I change this to, you can click and drag on these and say, if we increase that to $6 billion, then we can see the way that it changes all of these numbers here. And reduce that down so that it's only 10 miles per gallon that changes those values as well. So, the manner in which the manner in which this can give insight is slightly more freeform, but it's exposed in a way that means that while I agree that the people in the room, so to speak, might not be preparing this document, it's not implausible for them to have this as a calculator for being able to discuss the impacts of changing some of those parameters within the context of a proposal.
Yeah, you're right. They're doing that right now with Kristen Sinema from Arizona in the Senate. Some staff members are doing that. Her staff members and Schumer and other members are doing that.
Yeah, so that's great. This document is simultaneously about climate change, but also about computational notebooks. Largely before, so this is 7 years old or so now. So largely before the tools or the concepts were in common parlance. So I don't know that it was the singular document that was responsible for it, but it's one that sort of drives it. And so a lot of scientific computing is done this way now, where people will be sort of writing their process, inserting data as and where necessary, and then creating things. What's not currently quite as popular is providing those air-level handles, but I think that that's just a matter of time and the sophistication of the tools and recognition that they can play different roles to different audiences. In the sort of computational geometry space, I have a friend who I'm not sure if I've shown you things like my cake. I will go because it's relevant, even if it seems flippant. So I'll just load that up. So one of the things that I do is art of a kind. And one piece of that art is this kind of cake. And this isn't just a 3D model that I made in a 3D modeling package. It's a whole sort of family of cakes such that you can change the radius, the number of layers, so that it's very tall. You can change the twist on the candles. So all of these things are sort of computationally generated. You can change the words, so it's it says future text on it instead. If you think that would be a nice thing to make a cake about. Yeah, a lot of people build. So this is a relatively straightforward dashboard to be able to use, but the process of actually building this was just standard code. But also it could be this dashboard, but it's easier even by putting some of these handles on the document itself. Within the sort of the geometry world, there are a company like Trimble. They make a program called SketchUp, and Autodesk. They make AutoCAD and all of those programs. They are investing in building tools that allow people to create objects with those kinds of parameters on them, and then to create systems to create those creators. So what that cake thing is called a configurator, and what they're building at Trimble now are meta-configurators that are where you have the ability to sort of compose some kind of procedural or parametric model for the visualization of an object, and then be able to provide sort of different levels of detail for the visual dashboards, potentially even including objects in situ on it. Effectively, in the animation world, that we call them animation rigs, where you might have objects that encode how much somebody is smiling and things, and they're very valuable for the expressive authoring of those things. But I feel like a lot of those techniques have a broader relevance as soon as people kind of discover them, yeah, look forward to trying to diffuse them into as many other contexts as possible.
Yeah,
but I would say that they have a lot in common actually with explorable or computational notebooks, insofar as they're sort of intermingling visual representations of data and the data themselves and observations about that data. And so, yeah, the messier we can get in sort of commingling all of those concepts, the more powerful our tools become.
I just dropped 3 links in the sidebar to the documentation for the Inform 7 interactive fiction environment, which itself is a set of interlinked computational notebooks. The first one is a general documentation page. The second 2 are the start pages of the 2 cross-linked manuals. The first of which follows a programming language oriented perspective looking at the technology, and the second, which provides a thematic guide to what you can achieve using the environment. So if you're a writer, you'd use the second book. If you're a programmer, you'd use the first book. And at each point in the book, it cross-links to the corresponding documentation in the other book. So if you're looking at an example of how locks work, the example of locking a room would link you back to the computational structures in the Inform language that allow you to build locks and specialize them in the first manual, and you can jump between them. And if you look at the documentation in the Inform 7 environment itself, the actual samples will load in a side panel alongside the documentation panel so that you can execute the code. Then there's also a visualization system called the Scheme that allows you to look at your path through the interactive text simulation, which is basically sort of a time travel debugging system, allowing you to step back and look at how a sequence of code operations progressed, bless certain paths within them that were the intended result, so that you can spot whether your code change has caused a deviation from how the rest of the code is running. Very, very interesting system. And it can be thought of again as a programming environment or as a writing environment.
Right. So on a non-programming environment, I'm just going to paste some text into the chat there. So we know roughly when these meetings start. They usually start on the dot, unless, I'm off by a minute or two. So what I've done kind of as a test for us is 1 hour and 26 minutes into this, Fabien introduced computational notebooks. So it shouldn't be that much effort for me then later on to turn that into a time-based link into the YouTube video. Below that, there is Brandel shows another perspective, and there is a link to the resource he looked at. All of this isn't that complicated. It doesn't take too much time for me to do. But my question to the community is, once that is done, where do you want to see it? Do you want to see it on our website under every meeting has a post? Do you want to see it in our PDF journal? Do you want to see it in VR? This is really the key point. Where do we go back ourselves, and where do we send others to look at highlights from our work?
YouTube.
Yeah, but not only YouTube, right?
I mean, you can embed YouTube videos, or I think you videos. Everybody likes it. It's a pretty popular format. It's just like 2 hours video without a title, except the date. For most people who don't are truly passionate or trusted, is inaccessible. So I think YouTube might not be enough, but it's definitely a good place to start at least, and eventually, we can find a place to search through. But I would.
Yeah, the way. Sorry, I cut you off. I was going to agree with you. It's in the kind of, the video is the best initial source of truth. But one of the things that I would like to see is an inversion of a couple of things. So, one thing would be, the YouTube videos do an automatic transcript generation. It's flawed, whatever, but it would be possible to build this build a bookmarklet. And when I say I look to be inspired to doing stuff, that's something that I might actually invest time in doing, is to build basically a bookmarklet, something that you can click on your Safari window or whatever, that inverts the scale and real estate of things, so that you have your YouTube video and then the running transcript as a fairly large panel next to it, such that it would be clickable. Because I feel like the technical sort of handles all of the pieces that are the most relevant are present within the YouTube video and the transcript, or between the two. But the fact that YouTube believes that it's for the video is a problem that can be rectified with hacking the page.
Sorry, just trying to make my hand fit. Okay, so here's the challenge then. It wasn't that difficult for me to do that, but it would be nice if maybe just as a social thing, if you guys just write, and when you do write something in the chat, if you want to highlight something someone has said, write the time code. And by the time code, all I mean is we assume the meeting starts at 4 UK time, right? So let's say that's okay. I think, Bob, that's 8 o'clock for you, right? So let's say that Brandel says something 33 minutes into that. That would be 8:33 for you. All you would need to write is 33 and then a quick keyword. Because that would be very, very easy then to convert into, when you watch the YouTube, the kind of links that Fabien was talking about, right? And so that way we can all add to it. And that can also go into our transcripts. So it can be in multiple places, but I do agree with Fabien that the most basic thing that I should do as the kind of putting the video up there person is that if there is something known, just put a link to it in the description, because that link does work for chapters. Does that make sense? Okay, so
a few minutes ago, I asked Frodo what he wanted from the group. Does anybody remember what he wanted?
What I wanted. Well, the thing, hang on, I was just putting that down as a time code. I want to augment our community. so that we can have the discussions that Brandel was talking about, that we have the easy, casual place for Fabien to demo stuff and discuss things, and general things like that. But I also would like to try to find ways to refine what we discuss a little bit. So this is one stage, just doing those in YouTube links. I also think that maybe what we should do is have monthly Bob Horn sessions where we build a mural together, and that's all we do is say, okay, over the last month, with our own thoughts and notes on the topic of something that'll be guided by Bob, like he is an expert at doing, we do that. So we don't have to worry about when we're editorializing and when not. Because I editorialize primarily by having our monthly session written up, you know, how to present that and so on. So it is very important we keep it very casual, but some of us want to extract more structure than others. Make sense? Everybody agreed with that, or something.
As I recall, you asked this group to help you create a demo.
Yeah,
some
I
minutes
would
ago.
like to, but
and nobody responded to that,
well,
as
Bob,
I
the thing,
understood.
the
No,
thing is,
and that's interesting to me. It may not be interesting to you, Rhoda, but it's interesting to me that people expressed other interests and takeaways from the group.
well, Bob, we've been doing this.
Or did I miss? And I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the group
I know
right
you
now,
Sure.
Froda.
I know you're
I'm
talking,
wondering if that's what other people experience.
Bob, I know you're talking to the group, but this is not a group where we build things. If we get inspired, someone will build the thing, but it isn't a working group. But please, other people, do please respond.
So insofar as Frodo was asking for things to be made that could be interesting for Vint to see by September, I don't see that as incompatible with what I was saying. Is like I like to be inspired to produce things that are of relevance. So it's not a like a burning need to satisfy that express requirement or desire. But I see what Fabien and I said in that Fabien would like to be able to produce prototypes and ideas with a few minutes notice without having to provide too much context and explanation. That I think sort of addresses the high level concept of finding material to show to people like Vint. And I would say that, you know, the things that I've done along the same lines of the being able to put a mural into space and also the idea of the folding, you know, that was something that I've been thinking about for a while, is the manipulability of those objects, and to the extent that those come to me, and you know, I built the rendering of an author document over the internet into a node graph that's visualizable in virtual reality. So those are the kinds of things that I look to this group to provide inspiration and enthusiasm for, but you know, it is not my full-time job to build them. So no, yeah, it's lower down on my priority list than being inspired to do so, because if it's not a specific question that I have a burning desire to explore myself, then I won't have it. So, you know, for really wanted to build a sphere, a goal, and so I don't see what I get out of it. So I didn't do it myself. But yeah, it's the priorities are not exactly in line, but I think they're not entirely incompatible. Is what how I would characterize it, Bob.
Mhm.
I mean, the way that I look at it, Bob, is we have incredible people who sometimes wants to build stuff, and my job is to present that somewhere. And also, I have to be emotionally, intellectually honest and say that if I was given a research budget to build some VR stuff now, it would take me a lot of time to find out what to really build. We'd have to experiment quite wildly, because this stuff here is extremely primitive for one thing. Just the fact that you put it on your head and you're in a gosh darn lobby is crazy. I can't just put it on my head and I'm in the same workspace that's on my laptop. So there is a lot of overhead. There are a lot of issues. So infrastructure is, of course, one that we've discussed many times, and visual meta could be part of that, by no means everything. But also, now that I've gone through another revision of my huge PhD document, what I actually want in the VR space is really hard to answer. When I go through, this bit of the process is really annoying. Most of the time, I find a way I can actually change author on a normal 13-inch MacBook screen to fulfill that job. So that's why I keep banging on about the record, because the record of our meetings, A, is valuable, B, it's free, it's a resource, but it also, the way we can interact with it to try to find stuff is a really huge challenge. And that may be where a multiple dimensional space type thing can actually help us. Because having spent some time in VR now, a lot of my preconceived ideas of it's a memory palace and you have this there and that there doesn't necessarily help. So that's why it was so nice yesterday to do this little moon landing thing, to be re-inspired by space. Space. Come on, that's funny. Space and space. Peter, you shared one image earlier and you're sharing another one.
Yeah, I
What
just
does that
dropped
mean?
a couple of screenshots showing the interactive debugging environment from Inform 7. So you can actually see how different paths through the execution create extra branches in the tree. And you can see in a second shot the little pop-up menu allowing you to indicate what point in the tree are the desired interactions versus ones that you want to prune out later on. So if you typed in a wrong command, that wouldn't be part of the blessed transcript. That's the whole mention of blessed is, here's the run through going the way I want it to go. And then if something isn't blessed, that's where the user made a mistake when you're in the process of debugging. So the nice thing there is that you're visually capturing mistakes and dead ends along with a desired walkthrough sequence. And a lot of notebooks and things don't recognize that you have false leads and dead ends that you might be pursuing. So you'll get, here's my tutorial walkthrough, and you don't see the mistakes and the false starts someone made in the process of developing that. And I think that's a useful thing to have, even in literate programming programs too, the idea of being able to capture both the final outcome and also the steps and the process along the way to developing the outcome. In the book, Led Over Lambda, the author has a very nice system of introducing partial implementations of code blocks and keeping them as part of the transcript and just using like a little naming convention to indicate whether this is the final example of the code or whether this is the partial step working example along the way. And I found that incredibly valuable as an instructive facility.
Yeah, that's very nice. Thank you. So coming to a close of our conversation today, one of the things that I tried to do in the beginning of this period this year with this group was to imagine VR working spaces, and the way that I prototype was by writing hyperbolic essays that I know some of you, particularly Mark Anderson, found greatly annoying because it's all hyperbole and all of that, but that's my way of dreaming. Fabien has a different way of dreaming. He makes prototypes. And I think that's absolutely fine. I think some of our discussions here will be very productive in the sense of producing something. Some of them will be purely mind expanding. Some of it will be boring. But I'm wondering going forward if we should do something along the lines of you know, today was supposed to be about connections, but we went quite far into our community. And I think our community connections are important because we are real people. It is a real thing. It's not hypothetical. So how we can connect our knowledge within. And we ended up with the most pathetic solution ever, YouTube links and YouTube description. But pathetic, they are the most useful. There's no question. I completely agree.
No,
I think
I'm not agreeing with that.
you don't think it's useful when you have access to YouTube video? To be
No,
able to
the adjective most.
Well, at this point, if we can find something else that is within our time cost to produce, that will make it more useful and accessible, I'm absolutely eager to hear that. And I think we should keep talking about that, but at least now we have the internal YouTube links. I'm going to do mine, and hopefully in the future, we'll remind each other to write down in the chat the rough time code and whatever comment we might have. I think that might be a useful thing. I mean, imagine.
I've got a doctor's appointment. So long, everybody. Bye.
Be healthy. Be safe, Bob. Talk to you later. Yeah, I see what you're writing, Peter. That's a bit deep for now, but you know,
I just wanted to get in the chat so that I wouldn't forget where it came from.
So, Brandel,
and that's the quote. Oh, and that quote is the actual quote from the link just above it.
Okay, thank you.
So you know where the text came from for the record.
Right, thank you. So, Brandel, you being the most Mac literate person in the room, do you think there is an API or a thing that, let's say we build a super simple app, and that app knows when a Zoom meeting recording starts? We could probably do that, right?
I imagine so. I'm not very Mac literate.
No, but wait. Let's forget this. Frode, just write the offset. Like when we start the meeting, the first thing you type is +5, and then we know it's 5 minutes off or minus.
Oh yes, but Fabien, that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm doing, and that's fine, and it'll be roughly correct or not. But imagine if we had an app that either the audio or screen or something, because I'm sure it's the same with you. I may very well forget to run the app and say we're recording both of this. Okay, let's pretend we do. We have a super simple app. One Zoom is running. We click. We just started Zoom roughly. So when we then write our notes in there that are specific for this, when we stop, it'll do the offset for us, generate, once it has the YouTube video uploaded, every single note on an individual line will get a link.
Yes.
That would be very useful, wouldn't it?
Yes, we can write a script based on the time creation of the file, assuming your computer is has the correct time. So.
Okay, bye all. I have to jump.
Yeah, me too. I have a phone call I have to make. Okay, this was all useful and interesting, and I'm greatly grateful. And I look forward to Monday. Maybe we do indeed do some more computational notebook stuff, because that is a hugely interesting topic.
Weekend. Have a lovely weekend.
Have a wonderful
Thanks,
quiet weekend. Bye, everyone. Bye.